Due to increased internet censorship, truth is under attack like never before. And the truth about the controlled demolitions of the World Trade Center towers on September 11th is just as important as it ever was. To stay updated on our work, make sure you visit ae911truth.org and subscribe to our email list. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can receive alerts when our videos are posted. No algorithm can silence the facts. By subscribing directly to us, you make it impossible for the censors to stand between you and the information you need to know. Visit ae911truth.org right now and stay connected.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am the host, Andy Steele, and tonight we are joined by our board chairman, Roland Angle. Last week we brought on Kamal Obeid to talk about the Scientific Integrity Act. This week we are going to do the same thing, go into it into a little more depth, because I really believe this piece of legislation that we are currently drafting is going to change the face of scientific reports issued by this federal government for the future, and it's going to make a better future for the citizens of this country. Let me give Roland the formal introduction. Roland Angle graduated from the University of California, Berkeley with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. He served in the U.S. Army Special Forces, where he was trained in the use of explosives, and he became a licensed civil engineer in California. His 50 years of engineering experience has included designing and testing blast-hardened missile launch facilities, designing U.S. naval explosive containers, harbor terminal facilities, earth foundation systems, and hydraulic systems. In addition, Angle has owned 3 construction companies and has taught engineering subjects to high school students. So, Roland, thank you for coming on 9/11 Freefall today to talk about this important initiative.
Thanks for having me on again, Andy. It's always a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure working with this fine team here that we have at this company. We have been through a lot together here, the people at AE 9/11 Truth, trying to get justice on something that is very clear when you actually look at it, even before you get into all the evidence that you have put forth and that others have put forth, getting into the nitty-gritty of Building 7, for instance. Most people can watch Building 7 come down and intuitively know that this building was brought down in a controlled demolition at 5:20 in the afternoon on September 11th. That usually is what gets people rolling and brings them our way. But I'm going to start off, since we covered a lot of the Scientific Integrity Act last week and the ins and outs of what it's about. In all of your years as an engineer, did you ever think we would be at a point where citizens need to actually organize and rabble-rouse to demand that their government issue scientifically accurate reports, that they put forth a good faith effort to give the citizens of the United States the truth?
I can't say as I have. We seem to be in a situation where we're digging ourselves deeper and deeper and deeper into a hole. And the further we dig, the worse things get. We started this whole process of trying to get the truth about Building 7 and the towers out of NIST. And now we've gone all the way to the Supreme Court and had the courts rule that, in fact, they don't need to submit accurate reports to the public and they don't have to be truthful. I couldn't imagine that they were ever going to actually come right out and say that. I don't think anybody could. It's staggers the mind to think that we have a so-called democratic republic in which the courts have ruled that the legislature and the administrative branches of the government can just lie to the public, and there's not a problem with that. Unbelievable.
Well, Well, I call it political science. I know there's a different definition for what political science actually is, but when you have politics influencing science, what else do you call it? I mean, at the very least, acknowledge that there's problems with these reports. When you can, and I gave this example last week, when you can look at pictures of the area of collapse initiation of Building 7, where they claim that this collapse started by these beams framing into this girder, and that this heat caused this thermal expansion to push this girder off its seat. But you can see that these fires were burned out an hour before. I don't know. That seems like an important reason to revisit the analysis, at least, to try to give us a better story than what we got. But NIST ignores all of it, and they hide behind this legal defense that says, hey, John Q. Public, I am not answerable to you. Now, this leads into my next question. The fact that they have had to take this stance, that they've had to hide behind this standard, this loophole, whatever you want to call it, saying, hey, we don't have to issue accurate scientific reports, and they don't bother to even defend their findings. We know that they can't. Is this a concession in your mind that their reports are wrong?
Definitely. If they knew that our criticisms weren't valid, you can bet that they would be right back on top of us and pointing out what's wrong with it. That wouldn't be a problem at all. The problem for them is that they're trying to defend an analysis of the failure of these buildings that cannot be defended if you're going to rely upon science. We've used science and an examination of the actual evidence to prove that their analysis could not possibly be true. If we were wrong, they would come right back on top of us and say, see, we've got you here, you're wrong. And they would be, I'm sure, thrilled to be able to do that. Unfortunately, they've been put in the position of trying to defend an official narrative that is politically based, not scientifically based. So they're trying to bend the science to make it fit the political narrative. Well, that's not going to work. It's not going to work if there's somebody there checking their work and pointing out the errors in their analysis and the omissions in their process. So they don't have an answer for us. They've had to fall back really on the courts. We took them into the courts hoping for some relief there. And the courts, unfortunately, have taken the position that the law, as it's written, doesn't entitle citizens to accurate and truthful reports from government agencies. So the courts, which are supposed to be a check on the other two branches of government, have simply taken a default position that the legislation passed a law that required agencies to submit reports, but didn't require them to submit accurate reports. So now we're going to try to go after the legislative branch again and say, well, then you need to improve the law. The law needs to say that they need to not only provide reports, but they need to supply reports that accurately reflect what happened in the matter that they're examining.
Right. And again, it brings me back to my first question. Where are we in America right now where we have to actually organize, appeal to our supporters to help us, to basically demand that our government do what we thought it was doing all the time? And it's one thing to say, okay, they made a mistake. Mistakes happen. We understand that. You hope they're not going to do that with one of the biggest mass murder events in U.S. history. But there can be mistakes that happen. But the important thing then is to correct those mistakes and reissue the report and give the American people what they paid for through their Federal Reserve printed notes so that we can have some truth and understanding of what really occurred, whether it be September 11th or even be some kind of even more minor issue, involving studying some biological materials growing on a log in a forest for whatever reason, if the government takes an interest in that. Science is science, no matter what the issue really is. And we live in crazy times right now. We all know this. I don't watch a lot of news anymore. I get the gist of what's going on, but a lot of people in our audience do. These are times that we never thought we would be living in. And we've got an election coming up with very controversial candidates on both sides, and some a lot of division going on out there. And so everyone's just sort of sitting on edge, waiting for the next shoe to drop. What's going to be the next big thing that happens that pushes our country in a direction that we don't like? So why? I'm asking you this. I have my own thoughts. But why is this act so important now with the United States of America at the critical point that it is in its history, in your view?
We've gotten where we are through a long process, which in my mind goes all the way back to the assassination of Kennedy. That was a crime that was never solved. The official government report on that execution, I think it's fairly well established, is not accepted by the vast majority of the American people. So you have a situation where you've got a representative democracy, and it's supposed to reflect the will of the people. In this case, the will of the people has come down on the side of saying that assassination was never solved. We never found out who actually carried it out. And the criminals got away with it. So I think that's the beginning of a long slide. When criminals are able to carry out a crime that affects the entire nation and the entire world in this case, and walk away, more than 60 years later, the crime still hasn't been solved, I think that emboldens the criminal element in our society, where they believe that they can literally take down the government and control it. And in my mind, 9/11 is the logical extension of that premise, wherein essentially, instead of just murdering the president, which is bad enough, they murdered about 3,000 citizens who were just going to work, trying to earn a living and support their families. And they used that as the premise for their move. Now, we still don't know who killed Kennedy, and we don't know who planned 9/11. They foisted it off on a group of patsies that they had established with their own devices. The CIA had established the Al-Qaeda organization in the Middle East to fight the Soviets back in the 80s. So that was their creation. They had their own patsies, and whoever carried this out, elements within the U.S. government were definitely involved. And now the contortions and the contradictions only become more extreme. So now you have a situation where the legislature, to take 9/11 as an example again, because I think it's a major aspect of all this, legislature passed a law saying that the government had to investigate itself and find out why these buildings collapsed, because that certainly wasn't expected in the engineering profession. Those buildings were supposed to withstand the impact of commercial jetliners. Building 7 wasn't even hit by a liner, and it went down in 7 seconds. These are anomalies in the engineering world. So now you have to have the government cover that up by creating a false narrative. And when the elements of that false narrative are pointed out and the evidence is examined, they simply deny it, and then they rely on the courts to cover for them. And I want to point out that the courts never have examined the evidence that we have presented. They simply claim that we lack standing. We and family members and other people who lost relatives we don't have standing to even ask these questions. And that argument, which the courts have been relying on up until now, has also been used in other cases, in pharmaceutical cases, in election fraud cases. Time after time, the courts simply dismiss these complaints and these allegations and say that the people that are bringing them lack the standing to even ask the questions. So that's another aspect of what's going on. The courts have joined the legislative and the administrative branches and saying essentially that we, the people, don't have the power to ask questions of our own government. So when they don't have any answers, that's what this leads to. They don't have any answers, so they simply use every argument, illogical argument in the book that runs counter to everything that this country is supposed to stand for. And they tell us, we don't have to answer you. You don't have standing. We don't need to explain ourselves, and we don't need to tell you the truth. So it's all very logical, really, if you follow it. It's gone from one to the next to the next. All these developments are logical developments of what happens when a criminal element is able to exert significant control over a democratic society and dictate what that government is going to do.
Yeah. I was just watching a documentary over the weekend. It was an old one. It was about the 2000 election and all the trouble that they had with the voting. And what you learn from that is, because you grow up and you think, oh, this American system, every component of it, whether it be elections, whether it be the investigation agencies, FBI, whatever, it's this big moving machine with all these intricate parts that are moving perfectly and they've got everything planned out. But when you actually take things down to the atomic scale, things are just as chaotic as, somebody trying to plan a birthday party at the last minute and whatnot. And I think this is taken advantage of by the people at the top to basically get away with whatever they want to get away with. So it's like, yes, you can have 9/11 free fall. You can have your AE 9/11 truth. You can put this stuff out on the internet. You can convince others. I mean, maybe if it catches on like wildfire and you get a few 100 million people or, tens of millions or whatever on board with you, maybe we'll get the mainstream media after you and tell everybody that these are just conspiracy theorists. Maybe we'll censor the internet. Maybe we'll play with the algorithms so that it seems like the videos aren't getting as many views, the articles are not getting as many hits, whatever. But when you actually challenge it, when you go beyond the talking about it and you try to do something about it, that is really where you see the system clamp down. And you wrote in an earlier statement earlier in this year about when we went to the Supreme Court and we petitioned them saying, hey, government's saying that they don't have to issue accurate reports. This doesn't make sense to us. We want to challenge it at the Supreme Court. They refused to hear our appeal, but you had written that this had played a critical strategic purpose. And the purpose was to show the government for what it is, to make it be the tyrannical beast that we all know it is. But it's one thing to instinctively know something, but then to see it demonstrated. And when the government comes back and says that we are not accountable to the American public, this is our only defense. We're not even going to defend the merits of this report. We're just not accountable to you. We have won a victory because we have forced it to reveal its face, to drop the mask and show us the monster hiding underneath. So you were absolutely right. And you mentioned Kennedy. I've watched a lot of stuff on that. I don't consider myself an expert on it, but I know a lot. I know that there wasn't like a truth movement around Kennedy initially because we didn't have internet and that kind of organization, but there were a lot of people raising questions, books being written. If somebody had looked at that investigation, seen the flaws in it, and had decided, hey, this country needs a Scientific Integrity Act, and it had somehow gotten that passed back in the 60s or early 70s, what kind of an impact would that have made on the 9/11 investigation if 9/11 would have even happened at all, in your mind?
I think it would have made a huge difference. Things would have changed the whole narrative that transpired after the Kennedy assassination. Because if the Warren report had been nailed to the wall, and I mean, there have been hundreds, maybe even thousands of books written about the Kennedy assassination that point out the flaws and the contradictions in the Warren report. If that had been forced into the public arena, and the government had been forced to actually examine what had happened and bring forth the evidence in a truthful and complete manner, then the perpetrators would have been punished. They would have been found, punished, and the whole narrative that came after that would have changed as a result. The Vietnam War would have turned out differently. Everything after that would have been different. So even though on the one hand we can say, well, these commissions and these reports and are just pieces of paper, and what do they really matter? Actually, they really do matter. What the government says is the official story, and the official story affects the way the broad masses of people think about what happened. We need to have a government that is reliably truthful and honest, or at least to the point where people have some remnant of faith. But what we're seeing now is that the mask is being ripped away. People are seeing things that they've never seen before, they never wanted to admit could possibly have happened. And the defenses that are being thrown up by the executive and the legislative and the judicial branch are beginning to crumble. And I think one example of that is the recent decision, the so-called Chevron decision, in which the Supreme Court actually overthrew a 40-year history of a ruling that said that when government agencies submit reports, they are to be considered the final word. And the court, for the first time, has come out and said, no, just because they're government agents and the government has declared that they are the experts, that doesn't necessarily mean that what they're saying is correct. And the court should have the authority to question their rulings and send it back to them for revision if they find that there is error or errors in their reasoning. So that is you've got people in the society that are on both sides of that issue. Some of them saying, "Gosh, this is the worst thing since the Civil War, and it shouldn't be this way. Agencies should have the power to define the truth in the matters of their expertise." But that completely ignores the fact that politics gets into the government, and partisan issues can sway an agency, as it has in the case of NIST here. NIST never should have been given the authority to investigate what happened to those buildings in New York City, because they're a branch of the executive government. And the Department of Defense, which was responsible for our defense that day, failed us. And therefore, you had one agency of the executive branch investigating another agency of the executive branch. And we know from history that that's going to result in a flawed performance. So I think the Supreme Court in this case has maybe caused a crack in this whole method of dealing with controversial issues. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
It's interesting. I found a article about the Chevron case, and one of the things they noted, they covered what you just spoke about. But they said this Chevron case, the original one, was a Reagan-era ruling, and that conservatives at the time were the ones advocating that the federal agencies are the final word on what happened. And this is an apolitical show. We don't lean left, we don't lean right. It just seems interesting to me that these were conservatives that were pushing this when that seems to be the least conservative position that you could have, because isn't conservatism supposed to be less government, more less trusting of government? But now here they are saying, oh no, the government's going to have the final word on these matters. It just seems kind of backwards to me, but that wouldn't be the first time I saw something like that. The thing I wanted to talk about too is that I've always thought about this. Took a while for architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth to be founded after September 11th. I think it was like 2007 or 8 that we were finally incorporated as a 501c3. Took a while for people to start talking about Building 7 even before 8E came into existence. And I've always wondered if there was old engineers the day of or the day after September 11th who were willing to speak out about Building 7, for instance, saying, I don't know if random fires could actually cause that. We really need to be looking for presence of explosives in this debris. We really need to be investigating that route. If they had gotten out front and been in interviews and spoken honestly about this, would it have made a difference in terms of how quickly this stuff would have come forward? The issue is that the media controls the narrative. So if there was an engineer saying that and the media was getting their marching orders from higher above and higher above and higher above, those engineers wouldn't have been on television saying these things. They would have gone for an engineer putting out the standard line. But what we're trying to tackle also is not just the idea that government has to be accurate in reports, but the standing issue that you bring up. The fact that John Q. Citizen has no say in challenging these official reports, even though we are all affected by them. You know, if the EPA makes a ruling or if the EPA has a policy and it's based on a scientific report saying this chemical does not cause cancer, and then people are getting cancer in a certain area, you know, we're affected by that. So I want you to talk about the standing issue, but the point I'm making about this is, if it was 9/11 and the Scientific Integrity Act had already been in place, let's say from the Kennedy era, it wouldn't necessarily matter as much if these engineers questioning 9/11 got on television the day of September 11th, started raising their alarms, because they would have that equal power to take it through the courts and have the ability to challenge it where it really matters, where things can get done. So if you want to elaborate on the standing issue, but also the point I just made, empowering the American citizens, could this actually prevent another September 11th from happening?
I think it's important to try to look at this from the standpoint of the people that pass the law as it is now. Look, there's a certain rationale behind what they're thinking. If anybody could challenge the validity of a government agency's report, their reasoning is, well, wouldn't this open the door to a chaotic situation where any citizen, you know, there's 350 million people in the country, any citizen that looked at a government report and said, you know, I don't think this is right, I'm going to take it to court, I'm going to challenge it, then the court is inundated with a huge amount of actions that they have to rule on. And that's exactly what the people are saying about the people that object to the Chevron decision are saying. They're saying, well, this is going to open up a Pandora's box of issues that the court is going to have to rule on. It's going to overwhelm the courts. The court doesn't have the expertise to tackle these issues. And therefore, it's going to devolve into a situation of utter pandemonium. And the system is going to descend into anarchy. So that's an argument. I think that argument has some validity. I think the court has to have the ability to discern reasonable objections to an agency's reports as opposed to those that are based in sound science. There's always going to be people that are not well informed, and so wrapped up in their cause that they make arguments that don't withstand reason. But I think that the question is always organization. In the case of the engineering profession, there were engineers in the original event. Some of them spoke out and said they thought, they had a theory about what had happened and so on and so forth. But they weren't able to organize any organizational support for that position because the professional engineering organizations were locked up at the top. They were locked up at the top because they had been brought in by the government to participate in the government's investigation and therefore had become tied to the official narrative. So they're still taking the position that the government reports are okay and there's nothing to be seen here and, it's time to move on. Even though we have definitively proved that their reports don't have merit scientifically. So this is a balance that has to be made, as in all matters of government. There has to be some balance. There has to be some reason. I think that as engineers, we now have 3,600 supporters who agree with us, and we have organized, and we've been able to get as far as we have with it because we're organized, and because we have an organized and systematic, well thought out appraisal of the government reports. This is not just one or two individuals, maybe people that have engineering backgrounds, maybe not, criticizing the government report. So the balance is that we're saying, listen, first off, the people that we have organized here are experts in their field. All right. The 3,600 people that we've got to sign our petitions, they have credentials. They've been licensed by the state. They know what they're talking about. This is not a bunch of random individuals. We have a collective analysis that we put together that we agree upon. It's not, a bunch of different theories. Yeah, there are some people on the outside are saying, well, it wasn't nanothermite, it was nuclear power, or it was directed energy weapons, or what have you. That is a side issue, really, in my mind, because whether or not whatever kinds of explosive and incendiary devices were used to bring the buildings down, it still doesn't match the government's report, which says it was as a result of the fires caused by the plane impacts and office fires in the case of Building 7. So we don't disagree in that regard. And we are saying we have reasonable cause, and we have backed it up with studies at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. We have depositions of engineers. We've put on many presentations. We've presented our information to more than 1,000 engineers around the country. Not one of them has disagreed with us. None of them have said, oh, you're way off base with this. They've looked at our evidence. They've looked at our analysis. They've looked at the scientific basis and the mathematical basis for what we're saying. And they're saying, you know what? You've got something here. The government needs to look at this. But you have to contrast that with the fact that the leaders of our organization have been bought off. They're bought off or scared off, somehow incentivized to take a position that the government reports are valid. And a lot of that is because they were brought into it and they were part of it. And somehow within that process, and we've laid out 24 decisions within the reports that NIST produced that are contraindicated by the evidence and scientific analysis. When we present that information, no engineer disagrees with us. However, our professional leadership, unfortunately, has sold us out, and they have their reasons for doing so. I wouldn't go into what I think they are, but I can imagine that they involve a series of negotiations, threats, coercion, reprisals, withdrawal of funds, what have you. There's lots of ways that they can influence people in powerful positions to take decisions that run counter to their professional interests. That's what's happened in this case. We've seen the same thing happen in the medical field. We've seen the same thing happen in the legal field. This is again, a confluence of events that has resulted from the fact that 65 years ago, a massive crime was committed. The president of our country was assassinated, and the criminals were never brought to justice. We have a continuation of that stream of events going on today, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better.
That's right. And I think anytime you introduce money into a situation, you make people more easy to control. Just like, this is a little off the topic, but not much. YouTube, the moment they started monetizing videos, people were making money off of it, which it is. You brought in a bunch of people who were just there for the money. They're putting out content for whatever the system wants, drowning out the legitimate people that are just putting out their content for getting in, they want to get the truth information out there. They get drowned out. But then even if they weren't drowned out, they're starting to play ball now because there's a significant income they're getting from this. And if they mention certain topics, they can be demonetized. So anytime you start introducing money into something, you have more risk of conformity, control, and all of that. You mentioned about the medical profession, and I know we were on a board meeting, we were talking about the Integrity Act, and you mentioned a case about a group of doctors that you read about, and how how it relates to our issue here regarding the court case with Building 7 and the Integrity Act. Could you share that with our audience?
Sure. Some of our viewers may have heard of this. It made the news. It's actually a pretty big story, and that is there was a group of doctors, obstetricians, who challenged the use of an abortion pill, and I can't remember the name of it right now. It's a name that's difficult to pronounce, but at any rate, this is a pill that's been used for the past 15 or 20 years, wherein a woman could take the pill after having sexual intercourse, and it would induce not spontaneous, but it would induce an abortion. Okay, so there were a group of doctors who were obstetricians, and they said that they occasionally had to treat women that were suffering from the ill effects of one of these pills. In other words, something went wrong, and the woman's health was threatened, and they had to treat this woman. And these were people, these doctors were all of their faith prevented them, in their mind, from treating women who had aborted their fetus, as they felt that was against their Hippocratic oath. And because this had been brought about by this pill, which never should have been used in the first place. They were against abortion. Absolutely. So the court ruled that the doctors lacked standing. They said, well, this doesn't really affect you. You're not entitled to have this court hear this matter because it hasn't affected you. You lack standing. Well, that's the same way that we were treated when we took our case to the courts regarding the NIST reports, and they said, well, this didn't really affect you. You don't have standing. But that ignores the fact that as engineers, we have to abide by professional concerns, and we have to be concerned that our professional knowledge and expertise is accurate. And when inaccurate and false information enters the arena of our professional discord, that's going to affect us one way or another, either by costing more money to investigate and analyze and design projects because you're doing things that you don't need to do, or your understanding of the physical process has degenerated to the point where you actually make mistakes and endanger the public safety in that way. Same thing is true for the doctors. If they allow, the whole question of abortion in medicine is a controversial one, as we all know. So for the court to claim that the doctors had no interest in this issue, which concerned their practice, is, I think, it's just a false conclusion. The doctors are obviously affected. And we as engineers were obviously affected by the 9/11 decision. We already have engineering firms that are claiming that they're going to teach people about how to design buildings to withstand progressive collapses, as they claim happened with Building 7. Well, if Building 7 wasn't a progressive collapse, you don't need to design things to prevent it from happening. So that's all wasted time and wasted effort, and it leads to false conclusions. So these decisions, the court, I think the Chevron decision and this decision in the medical decision run against what the Supreme Court, what the appellate court has ruled in our case, which is saying that they don't need to submit truthful and accurate reports. I think that's more and more going to come into the picture as we travel further down this road. I don't think any of us want to live in a society where our professions don't adhere to a code of conduct and a standard of care that has been established over many centuries and has been agreed upon as being in the best interest of the public.
That's right. And actually, the people in the professions have more, I mean, not even talking in courts, but just have more stakes in what gets reported by our government than the people in the courts or in the legislature do personally, because again, they're the ones most directly affected by it. We did a focus, the podcast, The Focus, where you guys talked about a new building code. And that was a consequence of the official story of the World Trade Center collapses, destructions, controlled demolitions, whatever you want to call it. So when they base policy, the people within the professions, off of an official story given to us by our government, those people are affected. And as I pointed out earlier, the American citizens are affected by whatever official proclamations our government gives, because the mainstream media cites the government as the official source. How many times have I seen when you're looking up AE 9/11 truth, and just about every single search engine or a thing like Wikipedia will say that we're controversial, that we're not supported by the majority of the building industry that supports the NIST reports. They don't really qualify this in any kind of way, just the leadership of maybe the AIA for architects or the ASCE for the engineers side. They don't talk about the grassroots or all the people that go to the PDD presentations, the engineers who end up agreeing with us. They're just saying, they're quoting the leadership that says they don't support us. But all of this is based off of an official story that NIST itself has conceded that it can't defend by hiding behind this legal logic. So we are all affected by it. And as I said last week when we had Kamal on, I mean, this could be the difference between peace and war, an official scientific report from the federal government. If they're talking about a country close to the United States where another country is hiding nuclear weapons and they're claiming they're hidden underground, but we have this radiation signature, sir, and you can, if you we have our scientists here to back up these numbers here, but if the numbers are inaccurate, if the whole thing is fabricated because somebody wants a war, that's going to affect all of us. It's going to affect the soldiers that go over to fight in this war and lose their limbs. It could even affect the people at home if somehow this war gets taken to our homeland. So our reports absolutely have to be accurate. And for me, this is about leaving an important legacy. We continue to beat the drum on September 11th. We continue to advocate for a new investigation. We still have the Bobby McIlvaine Act, which has not been adopted by a member of Congress yet. But because this came up in our whole journey through the court system against NIST, it's like we have a responsibility to try to do something about this, because this goes even beyond September 11th, such as the doctor's case that you cited earlier. It could affect environmental groups. It could affect so many other groups in which challenging government reports, is their focus, just like us. That we have to take up this mantle, and we have to build coalitions, even if it's with groups that maybe individuals here don't personally agree with. The global warming issue or climate change or whatever they call it now. There's so many people with different opinions on this thing. I don't share mine because that's not my job when I'm here on the show. But people on both sides of that debate should be standing behind the Scientific Integrity Act, because when you got a report issued by the government on this subject, they should be able to look at that data and make their positions, form them based around accurate numbers. And so that's why I would call for all sides of every scientific debate to stand behind this legislation. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with each other on what the truth is, but you should stand for accuracy in what our federal government gives us, because it should not be based on who sits in the Oval Office at a particular time, what the science shows, whether it's Bush or Obama or Trump or Biden, anyone. These agencies should be acting in the good faith on behalf of the American people. So we're going to be looking to doing some coalition building, try to reach out to some other groups. You just got an earful of what I think about that whole part of our planned outreach, coalition building. I want to hear from you, though. How important is it for us to reach out to other groups that are challenging scientific reports and get them on board with the Scientific Integrity Act?
Well, I think that's the only way we're gonna get anywhere. Right now, all the professions are more or less siloed. In other words, we're carrying out a struggle within the engineering profession, trying to get the government to reverse its position on a very important catastrophe that affects our profession in many ways. And if we don't correct it, we can see that the status of our profession is going to be corrupted. We're going to get into a situation where our word is not worth the paper it's written on anymore, because the things that we're saying don't correspond to reality, a reality that we've been investigating and analyzing for thousands of years, literally, in engineering. So we have a duty. Unfortunately, our leadership is balking and not willing to take up that responsibility for their own reasons. And we're going to have to build a movement to overcome that. And I don't think we can do that within any one profession, isolated from the others. I see that there are groups of doctors and groups of lawyers, for instance, that are getting together and challenging their own leadership. And I think that we need to reach out to the broad masses of people in this country that are maybe don't have a profession to work within, don't have an organization that they can relate to other than the political parties. And, we need to overcome this apathy that things can't change. And we need to understand that we have the power to change it. And we need to organize and make that happen. And we need to find our like-minded citizens that are willing to join with us to make this happen. And that's a lot of hard work. It's not going to be easy, and it's not easy. We've been hanging on to this issue since, as you point out, 2006, 2007, and many of our supporters have, recently begun to question why we continue. Well, we continue because we have to continue. We don't really have a choice. If we're going to preserve our own house, that is the house of engineering, then we have to take up any challenges that could possibly threaten its continued existence. We all owe that to our forebears, the people that established this profession and fought for it and made contributions to it down through the centuries. And we will be derelict in our duty if we didn't do so. So even though we face opposition from our own leadership, we're not going to let that deter us. That leadership must either change its position or be changed. And In order to do that, we need to reach out to other people in other situations and communicate with them as to what our position is, why we're there, learn about theirs, and make this part of a broad movement to make a clean sweep of our current leadership, not only in our profession, but in the leadership of our country in general, that is refusing to look at the reality of the situation that we're in and is putting us all in great danger as a result.
Yeah, that's right. And so that means that, and I have no idea which groups are going to sign on with us early on, but there may be groups that we get together with for the Scientific Integrity Act. It's not necessarily going to mean that AE 9/11 Truth endorses their scientific position on a particular subject. All it means is that these people are interested in scientific integrity. And that is how you build coalitions. That is how you find unity on a particular subject. You know, we have so many people out there. Somebody from the left comes out and says something positive about our issue. You know, oh, we should question Building 7, and we announce it. They get so upset if they're from the right. Or if it's somebody from the right that says it. So the people from the left, they get upset about it. How dare you? How dare you put a spotlight on this person? They're terrible. They disagree with me on unrelated issues. We got to get past that. We got to get past that. The other thing that I think we need to get past is the conspiracy industrial complex. This is a term I have come up with. It's just like the military industrial complex, which always needed war going on to feed itself, keep on making weapons, keep on putting out these tanks and guns and stuff, and keep wars going to keep the money coming in. Well, there's groups and websites out there that always need to be on the new topic of the month in order to keep people viewing, keep those view counts high and money coming in. And that is not what we're here to do. We are here with a very specific mission, no matter how long it takes. You know, we try to be entertaining here as best as we can. I have some bling behind me. I always tell new guests, welcome to Vegas when they come on. But at the end of the day, our main mission is, and I'm not an engineer, but the people that I'm working with are, as engineers, is to use that expertise to shine a light on this one specific issue and to get justice on that. Again, no matter how long it takes. And so it's not to keep people entertained. It's not to keep you engaged because some new event happened in the world. Sometimes we go a little off topic, but it's usually something that's somewhat related to September 11th. But it's to get justice for this particular issue, because those people that died and those towers that should not have fallen on that day, by every opinion that I have heard on this show, they have not gotten their justice yet. So it is very important to stay focused on what we're doing, no matter what is going on in the greater world around us. So that's why this is so important, even though it's going to involve a lot of legalese, a lot of talking about legislation and reaching out to Congress. We're actually doing the work, and we are the number one group that actually has engineers at the helm giving their expertise, which is so pertinent to this issue. Roland, do you have any thoughts about the sentiments I just expressed?
One of the things that I've learned over the past few years, reaching out to engineers across the country, and I've talked to so many engineers that I've never met in person, but I've talked with them over the internet or with telephone and exchange papers and so on and so forth. I can tell you that the political spectrum of our engineering volunteers is very wide. Okay, we have people from every particular political persuasion that you can dream of, really. But we are united around this one issue, and we all believe that this is America, and in America you have a right to your opinion. You have a right to say what you think. You have a right to think whatever you want, and this is our legacy. We're supposed to be in a society that the government can't dictate to us. That it's based upon we, the people. We're the ones that the power actually resides in. But that's a challenge. To exercise that power and to make it happen as a group is a difficult undertaking. But that's the spirit that we have to approach this question in. We can disagree about everything as Americans. That's great. That's what makes this country great. We're free to disagree. We're free to speak our mind, and we have a right to do so. And nobody can take that right from us. So we have that going for us. That is our strength. I realize that today there's a lot of effort being made to divide people along the lines of party affiliation, particular issues, fear, so on and so forth. There's a lot of that going on. And I think we need to resist that with every fiber of our being. We need to remember that we owe each other our respect, although we may disagree, and we've got to find a way to solve these problems. It's the way it's always been and the way it always will be. That's our heritage. That's what makes this a great country, and certainly gives us the possibility to have the power to make changes that we think need to be made. But it's not going to be easy. We need to give up and think that somebody's going to do it for us, some celebrity, some famous person, some talking head. No, it requires our hard work, our own self-education, our own communication, our own determination to put in the time and the effort to make these things happen for our own collective benefit.
That's right. No, nobody does anything they'd rather not do unless they're afraid of something else. I say this almost every other week on this show because it's so true. And so in order to create that situation, we're going to need people making appointments with their members of Congress. We're going to be announcing that pretty soon. We're going to need people writing to members of Congress. You don't always have to wait for us to tell you to do it. You can do it. Tell them, hey, just forward our stuff. There's a guy he always either CCs us or BCCs us when he does it, but he always sends our bulletins when they're pertinent to the New York leadership, the senators, the Congress people. He has his own little note at the top of it telling them to pay attention to it. God bless him. We need more people doing that. Just a simple thing. Simple things done well every day are going to be what win this war for us. I heard that in a piece of World War II propaganda from a radio show in the 40s once, and I always remembered it because it's so true. Just tiny little things done well every day make a big difference. And so that's what we're going to need in order to get this over the top and create a legacy where the future does not have to do shows like this, does not have to have organizations like AE 9/11 Truth, and maybe we aren't going to have another 9/11 again. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Those nearly 3,000 people would still be here now, maybe if we had an act like this. So I'm going to ask people to donate to AE 9/11 Truth. We've got a long fight ahead of us. It seems pretty simple. Scientific reports from the government should be accurate, but I know there will probably be some resistance. So we're going to have to really amp up and really dig in with this fight. So please go to ae911truth.org/donate. Help out however you can. Roland, do you have any final words for our audience?
I just want to emphasize that what each one of us does matters. You may think that you're just one person trying to live your life, get by as best you can, and who knows what you're thinking or who cares. But that's not true. Every one of us has a responsibility to do what we can do. We owe it to those who gave us what we have today, and we should never forget that. We didn't get where we are today by a series of accidents and lucky breaks. We got where we are today because people sacrificed. They sacrificed their time, in some cases their lives, their health, their families, and their fortunes. And they paid the ultimate price so that we can enjoy what we have today. And we are doing a disservice to them and to future generations if we don't meet that responsibility and that obligation. It's not up to me. I'm doing what I can do. I ask each one of you to do whatever you can do. And it's up to you to decide what that is, but don't let yourself off easy. It matters.
Roland, thank you for coming on 9/11 Freefall today.
Thanks for having me, Andy. Always great.
Hit that notification bell and slam the like button and subscribe. Thanks.